Hello, everyone, and welcome to NorthStar community. It's so great to have you joining today. Again, we always make the assumption if you're here watching this, you're some level on your recovery journey. You may just be starting out, or you may have been on the road for a while. But no matter where you are on the journey, just remember it's worth the trip. You will actually start to experience a rich, full, meaningful life if you can stay on this road. It's tough. We all have times where we make mistakes, where we relapse, where we go back. But just remember, you don't start over. If you had a relapse of some level, got yourself to a bad situation, you have used again, or you've sworn off, I don't know, using social media, but now you're back doing it. Don't worry about it. You don't have to start over. You just need to get back on the road and keep moving forward. So we just have to keep remembering that addiction is destructive. It's based on us trying to protect ourselves from dealing with the emotional pain we had in our lives. Most of us have had trauma. A lot of us have had trauma from our childhoods where our parents and their brokenness was not there for us, or were abusive, or just weren't there and abandoned us, and we had childhood neglect. I mean, those are the three biggies. And so the big thing isn't so much that these things happen to us. They are big, don't get me wrong. But the bigger thing is, as adults, we don't deal with it. We go into denial about much of the pain that this caused. And then it affects us in so many ways throughout our life now. And so the idea is for us to become aware of the things that have affected us, so we don't keep acting out those things, so we can move forward. So again, you hear me say this all the time, but just keep remembering this. I really don't care about your childhood, but what I do care about is how your childhood affected you today. How does it affect you today? How is it that you're more agitated? How is it maybe you're more angry? How is it you keep having broken relationships? How is it that no matter how much you try, you just can't stop? Or no matter what you do, you seem to attract toxic people into your life. These are all symptoms for you to see, and not to blame yourself or to be angry at you and angry at all the people that harmed you, but it's for us to become aware of it so we can move forward. So yes, a lot of us that are watching this have had a lot of trauma in our lives. We can sit around, we can blame, we can be angry at people in our lives who cause so much problems for us, or we can take that trauma, put it in some sort of order, learn from it, and even eventually assign good to it, how it's made you a better person today, and then you can move on. Because really, as we keep talking about with trauma events, you can't undo them, you can't turn the clock back. But what you don't want to do is keep reliving those traumatic moments or the effects of the trauma on you for the rest of your life. Instead, you want to take that trauma, you want to deal with it at the pace you can, and then you want to start assigning good to that trauma so that you can see where, because of the trauma, you become a stronger person, a better person, a more engaged person, a more compassionate person, a more empathetic person. And that's what we're after. The problem is with trauma, it can take away so much of our foundation. I find it interesting how many of us have a hard time establishing a purpose in our lives or being part of something bigger than ourselves, because we're so busy defending, hiding, denying. And that's what addiction is all about: habitual behavior to avoid pain. So how about, instead of that, you face the stuff in your life, you overcome it, it makes you a better person, and you go out there then and you talk and help other people. And so I thought today, I heard this fascinating talk by Jordan Peterson. I would guess a lot of you know who he is. If you don't, you can look him up. It's Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's a clinical psychologist who in the last couple of years have just fascinatingly just really has taken up the spiritual side. I don't know what his spiritual upbringing was or anything, but he really has recently really become quite quite involved in Christianity, and of course, I love it because he comes from a psychological point of view. He kind of takes what we would call a Jungian. Carl Jung was a psychiatrist in I think Switzerland, Switzerland before the war, World War II, and him and Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud were probably the two top academians, really movements they started. So Carl Jung had these things called archetypes. He had he talks about there's certain things that happen in society, he calls it the collective unconscious. So there's a lot of things he talks about, and Jordan Peterson does a great job of taking the biblical view, combine it with the archetypes, with the collective unconscious, with the psychology of humans, and really assign some fascinating thoughts to being a Christian. And so he talked. I have this. I'm going to try to paraphrase him a little bit here, but when you look at the Old Testament, if I had to really narrow down the Old Testament to one word, it would probably be idolatry. We were in trouble with God all the time because of our acting out, where we didn't want God to be God. We wanted to be God. And so we would do so many things. We would act out in so many ways that were destructive. God would give us chances and we would not take them. And then he would do things to get us back in line. And it would take lots of generations to do that many times. And then we would do well for a while, and then we would start again moving away from God. So in idolatry is that, that we put things in our lives are way more important than God. Now, there's certainly a lot of idolatry today, particularly in America, because we have a lot of access to money. So it's easy for us to get caught up in materialism and forget about the spiritual side. And so we'll just go on this path though. So the big word in the Old Testament is idolatry. In the New Testament, I hadn't thought about this before. He was talking about, but he says sacrifice is the big word in the New Testament. So you think about it, Jesus Christ came to this earth. He was put to death badly by us because we wanted him to come and take away all of our pain. He wanted us to come down and take care of all of our problems so we could be happy ever after. But as you know, that doesn't work very well for us as humans. So when we look at this again, think about, one of the things that always fascinates me is think about the number of people. We'll use celebrities for a minute. I think so many times I see celebrities wearing crosses, either necklaces or somehow they got crosses on them. I've even seen tattoos. But yet what I understand about is they're not necessarily Christians. One of them that I think of course, is one of my favorite characters of all is Lance Armstrong, who claims to be agnostic at best, that he's not a Christian. He doesn't believe in that stuff. Of course, you see how he destroyed his life. But he wears a cross all the time. And so someone asked him one time, why do you wear a cross if you're not a Christian? He goes, I just like the way it looks. But I think there's more to it than that. I think there is a spiritual side. Talk about, Jungian's collective consciousness, the archetypes. The cross is an archetype, and the cross's archetype is sacrifice. And that's very attractive if you really think about it. And think about your own life. For you that are on this journey of recovery, for you in the beginning right now, if you're still in the beginning of your recovery, you may not want to hear this, but you're very selfish, you're very self-absorbed, and you are acting out many ways, and you're taking, right? Now, we give you some love here. You're doing this because of all the pain in your life. Remember, habitual behavior to avoid pain. So if you're further down on the journey and your life is starting to come together, you're actually having moments of rich, full, meaningful life, then you may understand sacrifice a little better. But here's the point. Even if you think in the 12 steps, they talk about that once you have to do the things you have to do. And I think, anyway, we've talked about this, that when you're in the early stages of your recovery, you need to be a bit selfish because you need to be focused on your recovery. But then, as you know, step 12 talks about then you go out and you help others. So that's sacrifice. So you get the point here. But we cannot ever, ever be happy if all we're doing is getting and taking, and taking. It doesn't work. And so I'm going to read Matthew 22, and this is the people asking Jesus about what is the greatest commandment. And he goes, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Now that is sacrifice. And I always talk about this. People sometimes don't like, they kind of give me a hard time about this, but I really do believe, I don't think Jesus thought we were going to do that. Because none of us do it. We all have things in our lives that are more important. If you don't, you're rare. You know what? But so he's talking about we have to sacrifice here. We have to give up ourselves and serve God with all of our heart, with all our mind, with all of our soul. And then we're going to have that rich, full, meaningful life we're looking for. And he goes, again, put a snore, he goes, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So you get the point here. Lots of sacrifice. If I love my neighbor, and you can define that, means probably anybody, but if you love your neighbor as much as you love yourself, of course we kid about that, sometimes a problem because how much we don't love ourselves, but we get the point. If we treat others like we want to be treated, that's sacrifice too. You know, I see my elderly neighbor outside scooping snow and I'm inside warm and watching TV. I can continue to do that. I can even pray for them that they'll have the strength, or I can get up, go out and help them. And I know it's a silly example, but you get the point. It takes sacrifice. And the thing is, we know that sacrifice, that we know when we give to others, when we serve others, when we help others, we know that it goes better for us. Our life is so much better. And we connect, we do things that are so good. And so I want to talk a little bit what Jordan Peters talked about. He was on the Joe Rogan show. And the other thing I find kind of fascinating is that Jordan Peterson, in another YouTube video I was watching, said that Joe Rogan had now become a Christian. Now, if that's true, that's big. So we get some on the peripheral side celebrities who are starting to come to Christ, and it's pretty exciting to see. And so he talks about how the cross is at the center of our society, and it needs to be. And the cross is about self-sacrifice. It's about sacrificing our whims, our stuff, for the greater good of society. And I think that's why the cross continues to be attractive. I mean, again, like I was talking earlier, I use Lance Armstrong, but there's other examples. But I see a lot of crosses out there of people who I'm pretty sure don't identify as Christians. And there's something that just tells me there's something powerful, spiritual, collective about the idea of the cross. And the greatness of our society, and I think America's been good at this in many ways, is that we're willing to sacrifice for the better good of people. And of course, we think about soldiers that do this all the time, or first responders, or people like that who just really give up themselves for others. And there's something so joyful about that. And if you think about the New Testament, that's what it talks about all the time, sacrificing ourselves for the greater good, for others to come to know the life and the love of Jesus Christ. And there's a merciful element to the cross that's amazing, in that we can be forgiven at any time. We are forgiven, actually, but we can accept that forgiveness at any time, and that's pretty big. And think about, I love this, what he talks about. If you take 100 of the best storytellers in America or the world, and put them and told them to write a story and have a bad ending, to come up with your story, creative, and the end of the story has to be bad. He said, you take those 100 writers, take all those 100 bad outcomes, combine them, it still would not be as bad as what we did to Jesus Christ. So Jesus comes to this earth. as God comes to this earth to love us, to teach us, to try to get us to spiritually see the values and the beauty of God and all those things, right? And of course we don't. We reject him because he doesn't take care of us. He doesn't take care of all our little needs that we want. So at the worst, so the crucifixion is worse than any of those 100 stories. Even put those 100 together, combine them, is not as bad as the story about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ, of course, we know could have stopped this at any time, but he didn't, because he sacrificed himself for us. And I think that's the beauty and why the cross still has appeal. And it's frightening to think about the cross not being at the center of our society. And I think in many ways, a lot of people would say that. But if you think about it, the cross still seems to have this way of being there. And so we have a tragedy. You know, it's a tragedy. The crucifixion is a story of tragedy. An innocent man, in fact, a very good man, in fact, the best man, the perfect man who did nothing wrong, is put to death in the most gruesome, terrible ways humans can do it. So one writer said, the cross, we have love at its greatest and we have hate at its strongest. You need to think about it, that's true. So the crucifixion represents all the brokenness, the cruelty, the evil of humanity, and it also has the beauty, the awesomeness, the kind of hard to put in words, love that God had for us. So we have this tragedy. Jesus voluntarily embraces this sacrifice. We humiliate him. He dies. He then goes into hell. He faces malevolence at its greatest. And then he comes back with love, tenderness, with all those things that's hard for us to understand. You know, and for us, for many of us, we've had some hard lives. You know, we talk about the adverse childhood experiences survey. We have lots of people in the room that comes that has scored high on the ACE. And the higher you score on the ACE, the more pain, tragedy, heartache, whatever words you want to use, you have faced in your life. But the beauty is, for you that keep coming and you keep working on it, you start to see the ACE as a grace, a representation of God's grace, because you're starting to put in order what happened to you in the past, what you've done in your addictive days. And remember, addiction is substances, compulsive behaviors, and people. So don't think just substances here. So vast majority of us are codependents. Vast majority of us have lots of compulsive behaviors. And of course, a lot of us have substance abuse too. A lot of us have all three, you know, whatever. Depends. But we have people in the room who had very, very difficult childhoods. I mean, mind-blowing at times. But they're coming, they're facing it, they're sharing, they're with other, or I should say, you're with other people in the support groups, find that you're not alone. And in a way, I guess you're sacrificing by coming, because you're getting past your fears, your anger, your resentments, and you're starting to experience love at a level you've never understood before. And so in order for us to thrive, we have to be able to sacrifice, and we have to face all the bad stuff in our lives, the malevolence that we have faced, the evil, the abuse, the abandonment, the trauma. We can go on and on here. And in fact, you're watching me right now, is courage, it's sacrifice, it's those things that get you better. And our courage grows as we face the horrors of our lives. We start putting things in order. We don't have to be so afraid of everything, or we don't have to be so angry and resentful towards everything. We can go both directions with that. But both ways, what I see so many times is we're little children trying to get our lives back, still waiting on our parents to be healthy and treat us right, or whoever. It's not going to happen. We have to do it ourselves, and we have to figure out ways to get there. And I think that as we start to understand, as we face the horrors of our lives, of our past, our traumas, That's when our faith can grow. It's when we can start to really become the really true self people. Um, we can come to love ourselves enough to love others, which means we'll sacrifice ourselves for others. Maybe not all the time, but some of the time. We can get past our own immaturities, the thwarted growth of our lives because we were so busy surviving, all those kind of things. I think most of you know what I'm talking about here. But we can confront the things in our lives that wrecked us and can turn those into gifts. And I know it's hard to hear sometimes. And I think I want to say this carefully, but I think it's so important, is the early Christians certainly believing that they one day would die and go to heaven was important to them. But that's not what they dwelled on. They dwelt on serving others, sacrificing for others. A lot of them were martyred. They saw the knowledge and the gifts and the love of Jesus Christ as making their lives more fulfilling here in the right ways, again, filled with sacrifice because they were to serve others, to love others. And I think that we sometimes get a little too caught up in the outcome, which is so important. Don't get me wrong. I believe I'm going to heaven. It's going to be awesome beyond my own understanding. But if we get caught up in that too much, we kind of quit self-sacrificing and we start being self-centered. And that's not what Jesus did. He went to the cross. He could have stopped at any time the brutality, the misery, the hell that he faced, and then the malevolence he was with for 2 days before he came back. No one would want that. And no one but him could take that. So let's just remember that, yes, we are, as Christians, we certainly can live with hope. We certainly can die with hope knowing that we're going to heaven. But let's not get so focused on that we forget the part about sacrifice and serving others and giving up of ourselves somewhat for others. So I hope that makes sense. So anyway, I thought today was an interesting subject about understanding sacrifice and how us sacrificing ourselves at some levels will move us closer and closer to living the life of the cross. The cross, the cross, the cross. That is the symbol of our faith. So I hope that we understand that this is how we will get to that rich, full, meaningful life, is when we start focusing. We need to continue to focus on our own recovery, but some of that focus is going to be starting to turn out and focus on others who need support as well. So anyway, I hope this made sense today. Glad you joined me. It's always great to get feedback on these talks. If you ever need to get a hold of me, you can email me at csimpson@wgva.church. Also, we meet on Wednesdays and Fridays at 6:30 here at Walnut Grove Baptist Church. We're located at 7046 Cold Harbor Road, Mechanicsville, Virginia. But if you're not local, thanks for joining. Like I said, you can reach out anytime. Be glad to hear from you. And we just thank you so much for joining today. And let's close with a prayer of serenity. And I think if you really hear this prayer again, it has a lot of sacrifice in it. It's the sacrifice of understanding you're not always going to get your needs met immediately, and the needs are much larger than the small ones you're thinking of, but the big needs of spiritual understanding, love, being there for others, and having others there for you. So thank you for joining us. Let's close with a prayer of serenity. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. Again, thank you for joining, and have a great week.